Welcome to Sculpture Studios. Well, we've got quite the spectacle of a video for you here today. We're creating a piece of art by renowned artist Lubaina Himid, and this is her Jelly Mould Pavilion. This is a public art installation nominated for the 2017 Turner Prize, and it's by far the longest video that we've made to date. It might be advisable to set a bit of time aside on a lunch break, or even in the evening for this one, and make sure you're nice and comfortable. Normally everything is streamlined for the purposes of making a video, sped up clips and everything cut down to watchable size chunks, and believe it or not, this project is no exception. But with the sheer amount of work involved in this job, we thought was massively important to show. This was very much more an engineering project, and hopefully you'll realise by watching the work process why this was such a big undertaking for us. This is a job that needed to be completely planned out from the start, and you can see just by watching these concept images roll by just how many calculations, measurements, drawings of different methods, metalwork plans and every detail regarding the fixings that a project like this needs. The pavilion canopy, almost like a park bandstand, is going to be going to Folkestone Harbour Beach, where an old fairground used to be. It's going to be made up of 4 quarter sections and an internal top cap, 6 legs and some seating, and as you can see there's going to be plenty of silliness involved, so stay tuned and enjoy the journey with us. Here we have the man himself. Let's see that mug, Aden.
Oh yeah, there we are. Aden, the boss.
That's right.
That's me.
So what do we have here?
Okay, what we have here is 1 exact quarter of a giant jelly mould, or a canopy top as we're calling it, and we was going to carve this section through here on the outside and the internal, and this here is an overlap, so when you put the next quarter on they lap over each other like this in a very precise manner, but we thought that carving would have been too difficult, as we need this absolutely precise, so it's really more of a bit of an engineering project, and this has to be spot on. And as you can see down here, we've marked the circumference of the whole dome itself, and through here is halfway through this joint.
This has been 3D cut by a company down in Southend, just down the road from us, and the idea of having a quarter made is so that we can take a fiberglass mould and replicate 4 times, and this way we're going to have a hollow fiberglass cast. It's going to be relatively lightweight for its strength, and in the middle there, top section, once the whole thing's completely round, Aden's going to carve a shell decoration, and there's going to be diamond patterns running all the way through the sculpture that Aden's going to carve out now. We've got to make sure we get nice and neat once again, because this is going to be moulded and replicated 4 times as well. Whole sculpture is going to be around 5 meters 15, and the diameter of this is going to be a 4 meter circle. Underneath the sculpture we're going to have what we call barley twist legs, and these have been 3D cut once again for us to take a mould, and we'll show you those when they come in. And they stand about 2.4 meters tall, so everything should be overhead height. And on the barley twist legs we're going to have some seating, and we're going to add metalwork through the legs and through the seating. Very nice big project. It should fill a nice middle portion of the workshop.
The beauty of this is we don't see it working until all 4 pieces are complete and put together. So yeah, it'd be interesting results.
It needs to be dead accurate and very nicely engineered. So here we go. The first step is to make sure everyone understands the project and the processes involved before we get on with any mould making. This polystyrene, or rather the master pattern for the canopy quarter sections, is ready to be moulded on the exterior, but the interior will first need to be finished before we go over with our usual sticky back tinfoil. All the diamonds are marked out on the interior surface with the exact number specified in the concept images. The tinfoil we're using here on the outside is to create a wall between the polystyrene and the resin that's going on top. If you don't have access to a material like this, you can use layers of a PVA glue or a spray-on solution that won't be dissolved by the resin to create a similar barrier. Oh, for God's sake. Providing any water-based materials are fully dried out and every inch is covered, you'll be ready for creating the resin and fiberglass mould. Here, walls are being created and added to the polystyrene pattern, so the fiberglass mould can be made and split into 2 pieces. The resin we're using is a gel coat layer first to give a relatively smooth interior, and we're bulking this up with powders that will make the resin easier to sand down, and this also saves on resin cost for the client. Once the gel coat layer's gone on and has had time to set, we're going to be backing this up with general purpose resin and multiple layers of glass fibre. Throughout the video, whenever you see us using fiberglass, you'll probably notice we always bump up around the exterior with extra strips so the moulds and casts have really strong, solid edges. Once the fiberglass is complete, we create a wooden frame to laminate to the mould as well, and this will allow the glass to retain the correct shape when it comes to creating each cast. This also allows us to turn the whole mould over without the shape rolling around on the floor. The fiberglass will eventually be sanded down, as well as all the wooden elements to the frame, so that everything's safe for the team to handle. This involves removing any excess material from around the edge of the job and trimming the fiberglass back to the gel coat lines. Here you can see the 4 metre diameter of the top canopy section being marked out on our floor. We do this so we can place the pieces together at ground level once everything's been cast, and the 2 lines you can see show the eventual thickness that the pavilion canopy will be. Marking out on the floor like this also allows us to work out the positioning of all the metalwork plates for the barley twist legs.
So what's happening here, Aden?
Here, we've marked it all out in pen, got all the dimensions correct, and now we're going through with a knife, and as you can see here, I'm trying to go like deep enough so we have the angles, and I'll just show you one here, and with a relatively sharp knife.
It's actually the last one, isn't it?
I think so. We're trying to take off an even depth throughout. And this is the last one, so I need a step to get up to there, but all looking good so far. And then we'll foil it and make it look quite nice.
We needed to get these diamond shapes confirmed during this stage of the project because it wasn't confirmed earlier when the whole thing was being 3D cut. Otherwise these would have been cut out as well, but we needed to do some working out when we'd actually receive the pattern to see what actually looked good on a job this size, how many, how close they needed to be. So here we are doing it by hand, and once these are all finished we're going to go over with our usual sticky back tin foil, secretly sourced, and this makes them all a bit forgiving. And once we've taken the mould of the interior, we can then clean up the interior of the mould, and we'll be neatening the diamonds up even more. When the cast comes out, once again we'll be sanding it all down, and so we're cleaning up the job every step of the process.
Once we've gone over with our sticky back tin foil, we wax the surface of the foil with a Vaseline as a release agent, and hopefully, fingers crossed, this allows the fiberglass to pop off the job without the resin adhering too much to the foil. The same process of a gel coat and fiberglass is repeated on the inside surface, and once again we create a wooden frame for the mould to sit on. The idea at this point is to get the job as neat as possible, as this forms the basis of the 4 quarter sections. Any major error at this stage will affect all the pieces and how well they'll join together. Regardless of how well we think a job will go, it's always best to anticipate problems later on and to compensate for any adjustments that need to be made. These sorts of situations are exactly why we factor this in when it comes to timing a job for a client, so that the final deadline dates are always met. Moving through the process now, the eventual finish is being improved every step of the way. The interiors of the moulds are being cleaned up, and this saves on quadruple the amount of sanding if we were to simply finish the casts when they each come out. The barley twist legs have been 3D cut from a high density foam, and here they're being sprayed with a high build prime filler and sanded back to a good finish. These barley leg twists arrived at the studio in 2 halves, so we can place each half face down onto a board to begin moulding them. We're going over with a PVA blue release agent in the same fashion we used Vaseline on the foil earlier, and once again we're using a gel coat and general purpose resin with glass fibre for the mould. These legs will eventually house thick metal support poles that would need to be joined and the seam lines cleaned up later on. Once the finishing up of all the moulds is complete, it's time to begin casting. Not anticipating any fires on the Folkestone beachfront anytime soon, we're using a general purpose resin for this job as opposed to a fire rated Class O. Not only is Class O not necessary for outside installations, but using general purpose resin also helps reduce the cost for the client. We're building up in 1 and 2 ounce layers of glass fibre, once again making sure that all the edges are extra strong. We let the fiberglass set properly inside the moulds before any extraction takes place, so we give it every chance to set at the correct shape. If we remove it too early, the fiberglass could warp before the resin has properly cured. We need to be careful when handling glass fibre and any tools in the workshop, as it could be a very sharp place to be.
Right, here we have one of the exterior casts. What we've done, we've laminated some of these curved battens inside the job to help it retain its form when it's out of the mould. And along these edges where the outside piece is going to have the inside piece sitting on top of it, we put these wooden blocks, and this will give us something to bolt all the way through to, so that we're not just bolting fiberglass together. We're going to have a solid block on the inside piece and a solid block on the outside piece, so when they're bolted together, everything's nice and firm and it's got a nice strong wall to hold on to. Aden's just putting in the final blocks here, and on the inside piece, which is the diamond piece over there, there's wooden blocks down that side on the other side as well. It's one of those jobs where we can't see what we've actually got until we've got 2 complete inside and outside casts laid up, laminated together, all bonded and fixed in place, and then we marry up the 2 together and see what our seam line is going to be like. All the pieces are now cast, and we're just going to get onto the joining and make sure everything's prepared before we do so.
And down here we have the metalwork plates that have been made by Fine Limit Welding, who do all of our metalwork fabrication. And these have got bolt holes drilled through them so that the first set can be installed inside the bottom of the jelly mould itself, and the second set can be installed on top of the barley leg twists. And then all these pieces can be put together and then bolted all the way through. Now ideally we need to get these as flat as possible here in the studio so that the legs all stay relatively straight, but their final resting position will really be determined when it's positioned on site, and these can be tweaked and adjusted slightly before they're concreted down into the floor. Now that the barley mould twist is complete and we've removed the inside pattern, we're now going to prepare these for mould making, the same as the jelly mould, and over there you can see the first plate being lined up before any resin and glass fibre goes inside. With the majority of the casting now complete, so that's most of the 12 halves of the barley leg twists, 4 external canopy pieces and 4 internal, we thought this a good time to invite the client down to the studio to take a look at the progress of the work. The project manager for this job is Sarah Black, and she's travelled down to our studio from site to meet Aden in person and see how everything's getting on. The next time we see Sarah will be down in Folkestone during the installation, so it's up to us now to crack on, and we'll see Sarah back down there in a few weeks' time when it's due to be set up. Believe it or not, the job doesn't get any easier now that everything's laid up, as half the work is the joining and the finishing. For this, we're creating what we call a squidge join with a resin bonding mix, and essentially squidging the two pieces together. We've laid the canopy section inside its mould, once again to stop it from rolling around, but more importantly to try and help it set in the correct position. We adjust the cast pieces so that they find a happy medium where they fit best, and we secure this in place while the resin sets.
Here's the type of image. We're after a kind of tractor seat. And that's what we've been given. They wanted something similar to that. Basically the size of it. Nice and comfy, something to sit on. Just carving this at the moment. The side elevation. I think I'll bring this down a lot more here.
Here a mould for the canopy seats is being created. A clay wall around the perimeter forms the basis of the top half, and once this half has been sealed with a release agent and gone over with a gel coat and glass fibre, the same is repeated on the other side with the clay removed to complete the mould. This then needs to be cleaned up internally so that 9 complete casts can be laid up inside. Simultaneously, everything else is being trimmed, joined and cleaned up generally, and the workshop's being prepared so that all the canopy pieces can be set up on a flat base in their correct formation.
Right, this is where we're at with the jelly mould so far. Sometimes it's not as easy as it says on the instructions or on the packets. In this case, our main concern is making sure that all these parts sit flush against each other with as neat a seam line as possible. We've gone through a process of putting all these parts together, the outside and the insides, recutting parts so that this side pops in and that side pops out to make sure everything's as neat as it can be. And what we've done here is a squidge join, which is where we've put our sticky back tin foil on here, waxed it up with a Vaseline or a release agent, and then used the bonding paste that we've made from resin, squidged it in there, and hopefully once this pops apart, now this is on this wooden base, it should go together neat every time, fingers crossed we hope. These bolts over here, they're going to be 10 or 12 mil. We're just installing them in increments up the outside, and they're going to be bolted on the inside. We're debating whether to keep these round head shoulder joints for bolts that have a nut on either end, just so there's a bit of continuity throughout the whole sculpture. to the inside. Once again, we've done the squidge join there, and we're going to be doing the same on all of these ones. At the moment, these trapdoors you can see are various methods of pinching everything tight and pulling it together. We were debating keeping trapdoors in the sculpture at one point, but in terms of neatness, we think that having no trapdoors and doing a nice squidge join and hopefully getting everything nice and neat is the best way to go. Here we've had the metalwork for the barley twist legs. If I can just get my lovely demonstration lady over here to tip this baby over. This is going to be nice and strong, made from steel. And these small bits of bracket here slot into the ends of these metal runs here with the 3 seats on each. It's going to be 9 seats total going around the clock. Up there we've got the metal plates where the fiberglass is going to sit on top, and we can bolt through to the metal plates that we've already installed inside the canopy pieces. So you're going to have 2 plates that can be bolted together through the fiberglass. The barley twist houses the metalwork, and once the slots are cut, these plates are then going to stick through the barley twist. And we've got an extra 30 centimetres on the bottom to securely concrete into the ground. Very nice indeed.
Right, well the music's all a bit serious, isn't it? Shall we jazz it up a bit? That's better. All the seats have been cast and they're joined and cleaned up around the seam line. The whole job is going to be primed with a 2K car body white primer that's suitable for outside use and a good solid base layer for Lubaina's artwork. The final piece to complete this build is creating the conch shell that you saw in the concept images at the beginning of the video. As this is going to be what's known as a relief, where the art is as though you're looking at the internal of the shell rather than a 3D sticking out, what we're going to do here is go down the exact same route of making a mould. We're creating a 3D master pattern from polystyrene, and we're going to lay this up with a gel coat and glass fibre as usual, but we're using this mould as the actual cast itself, as we'll already have the negative internal form that we're after. This needs to be cleaned up nice and neat prior to moulding, and also needs to be cleaned up again after the fiberglass comes out, as this is going to be the internal centrepiece. We're creating some wooden trolleys so that we can manoeuvre the canopy pieces around the workshop easily. The barley twist legs are being joined and all the seam lines made up to an invisible finish. These are then given an application of a brown self-etching primer and then given the same application as everything else with the 2K white. Hopefully you can tell by watching some of the processes here just how long some of these things take and appreciate the amount of work that needs to go into creating something like this. If something isn't being carved, it's usually being sanded, laminated, moulded and painted, adjusted and simply sanded again and again. There's a lot to consider when planning a project, particularly one as process heavy as this, where you need to factor in not only the material and staff cost, but just how long this sort of thing will take. The main thing is that deadlines are met and the spirits of the team are kept nice and high. Sometimes easier said than done with a difficult project, but that's why we have a little dance every now and then.
Right, here we are, a couple of days from completion for the jelly mould job. It's gone smoothly without any bumps, hasn't it, Aden?
Not really. We had the patterns made, absolutely lovely. We've done the fiberglass, and in this heat, everything contracts and moves around. So what we thought was an absolutely perfect mould, which it should have been, ended up being a sort of warping and twisting in this heat. But we're coming to the completion of the job now.
Bearing in mind each cast came out different, so it wasn't a case of the mould had set in one shape, because every cast that came out was different and sat differently after it was out of the mould.
We have it all, the four quarters together, and they do marry up, and they have these holes that go right away through where the bolts tie and lock them together. So nice and strong, but relatively light for their size. So here's the conch shell now finished, fiberglass. There's 13 holes around the outside, and it gets faced upside down and pulled towards the ceiling. It hides all that mess in the top of the cap of the jelly mould. But it's looking quite nice and strong, and it should finish the whole thing nicely.
All these holes are going to marry up with the holes that come out of what will be the top of the job, and we're going to have some long pieces of thread. If you imagine a super long screw without a bolt on the end, that will allow us to pin this to the very top of the sculpture, and then we can bolt the whole thing up on top, and this should hold it up quite nicely.
But it's not been an easy project. I'll show you the seats. Here's one set of 3 seats. On this corner here and this end here goes the barley twist post, and it all gets locked down. There's metalwork inside these, so they can't be twisted or moved, and they're nice and solid for people to sit on. We're having shed loads of bubble wrap and this cardboard, and we're going to wrap this up on Friday, so it's ready for picking up. But we're going to completely wrap the whole lot so it's protected and nice and safe.
On to Preston now, where the Jelly Mould Pavilion is going to be painted. We've organised transportation with a company local to us, and we've bubble and corrugated cardboard wrapped all the pieces. The delivery is going to be from our studio here in Essex. We've got to fix that trip line on the drive, yeah? And it's going up to Preston, where Lubaina is going to artwork the sculpture in her own design. When everything's finished, it's going to be taken all the way back down to the south of England to Folkestone in Kent. It's been a large space in the studio taken up, what we've needed to have all the pieces either standing up in their 4-metre circle or laying down for sanding and painting, but at least here in our new unit we can accommodate sculptures of this sort of size. Though this was more of an engineering project, with this kind of precision work not normally the kind of job we'd take on, we thought this would be a fantastic project to be a part of, and working towards the Turner Prize nomination for Lubaina. A lot of her work is based around history and culture, particularly that of the African heritage and the movement from the old into the modern day world. A few years ago, Lubaina created a maquette version of this art piece of the Jelly Mould canopy in Liverpool, inspiring the idea for this full-size sculptural installation. This piece not only represents the memorial of Folkestone Fairground, but the jelly mould can also be seen to represent the sweet sugar of the fairground, with the double-edged perspective of the sugar slave trade. This once again moves back to that African culture theme. Moving a piece like this out of the workshop allows us to have a proper tidy up. Not only tools, equipment and dust, but also to clear our heads and our palettes, as it were, as we prepare for the next big job to move into Sculpture Studios. Once everything is finished being painted up in Preston, it's time for us to pack up our van and head down to Folkestone. We're going to be meeting the sculpture down there on the seafront, ready for the installation. Now, being on a beach, there's no available power source nearby, unless you consider wind power, of which it was raining sideways towards the end of the second day, but this meant we needed to bring battery-operated tools, which made for very slow work. There are always adjustments that need to be made on site, and this was one of those times where we just had to bring everything we could and try and get it done with what we had available.
All the bolt holes are just going to be widened slightly using this Dremel tool on the outside, or a die grinder, just so all the bolts fit in nice and snug, because the square shoulder on each of the nuts needs to sit inside the job so that the dome caps are nice and flush. It's threatening to rain at the moment, so we've had to cover all the tools up over there. We've got the van in the background, so everything's had to be walked from the main road all the way over here, and the same with all the pieces. Their team's been carrying all the large pieces from the lorry that was delivered about 8 o'clock here this morning. And this is the artwork done by Lubaina. The first 2 of 4 pieces. Everyone's feeling good so far. Everything just needs to be worked out, how it's going to be lifted, all the straps going under, and how the whole thing's going to be suspended while the holes on the concrete base are going to be cut. So we'll see how that goes nearer the time. But for now, we've got to sort our holes out and pull the bolts through and piece it all together.
This is the first time throughout the project that Aden's had a chance to meet with Lubaina, and we're really glad that she's come down to site to meet the team and to see the sculpture in its final stages. One of the most important aspects of the work for us is that our clients are happy, and today everyone was feeling good now that it was finally going up. This is obviously something that Lubaina's been planning for a while, since her concept pavilion art piece in Liverpool, and we're glad that we could bring this to the full size in 3D for her. The aim for the public is to have this pavilion available for passers-by to sit and be able to contemplate and look out to sea with a bit of shelter above. The interior of the mould looked fantastic as well, being coloured white and blue with the conch shell being highlighted in the centre. The barley leg twists have been coloured a golden bronze brown, along with all the seating around the bottom that's decorated in the same fashion. Once all the 4 top pieces of the canopy were bolted together, we installed the conch shell. The 13 lengths of thread that ran through the ceiling of the sculpture all then simultaneously needed to be tightened to pull the centrepiece into place. This was then filled around the edges and a cap was placed on top to keep everything nice and neat. All the seam lines down and around the edge of the sculpture were finished with a mastic seal, and we touched in any areas that have been knocked with a base coat paint before the canopy is lifted. We've brought along these wooden chock boxes that you can see at the bottom so that we can get under and inside the sculpture while it's still at ground level. This also allows us to get the heavy duty strops under the canopy to be lifted by the excavator. The collaboration of work Lubaina has entered for the Turner Prize extends far beyond the Jelly Mould Pavilion. It's been years of progressive work depicting colonial history, race and racism throughout history and how it's perceived today, and many other deep-rooted themes of great importance to her that have all come together and are shown throughout many aspects of her work. She's been recognised significantly over the last few years in the build-up for this nomination, and we know her support throughout the community has urged her forwards. On the 5th of December 2017, we received the fantastic news that out of the 4 nominee finalists for the Turner Prize, Lubaina had won. A massive congratulations from all of us here at Sculpture Studios, and a thank you for allowing us to take part in creating a truly meaningful piece of art with you. For predominantly a painter, we love that you extended your reach into our world of 3D, and we hope that this is just the beginning for many more projects to come. We'd like to thank Sarah Black for managing the project, and a particular thank you to Lubaina, Matt Birchall and Teo Lashley Burnley for being a massive help on site. Please feel free to leave any comments below, as they're always appreciated, and hit the subscribe button for our latest videos. You can like Sculpture Studios on Facebook and follow @Aden Hynes on Twitter, and for more of our work, visit sculpturestudios.co.uk. Thank you very much for watching.